So Redux. Have you heard anything about Redux, Thomas? No?
No.
Okay. So, let's start. You already start using React. So you might notice that you're creating state in different components separately. And if you want to pass something, use your data in some specific component, you need to pass as props. And basically you pass in data from one component to another component. And sometimes it might be very complicated because you have a huge tree of components and it's not very easy to have an access. So yeah, basically here's a great GIF about what is actually how the props is happening, right? So you have you have your state and you just passing through components and component to component and component to component, and suddenly you finally got it, right? So it is a mess, and sometimes in big applications it is crazy and almost impossible actually to build something. So that is why local state is actually not always the solution for you, and you need to have some kind of global state. So before we move to another one, let me just quickly show you. So draw.io, I think draw.io can be draw.io. And decide later. So I just want to show you that I might draw it before. And yeah, I bet that I did something before, and it might be not with your cohort, but yeah, something like that.
Yes, you draw something on the servers, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So for the server, it was different for proxy, but here it's about passing data.
Yeah.
So let me just quickly check. Just want to quickly build one for you. So I'm just drawing basically the tree of components, so you can actually see what we have behind. And let me just pass it here and one more just here. So this is this is a tree of your components, and imagine that you have the component that has some data state, and you need this data in this component, right? So it is very hard to pass it to this component. What do you think? How you can handle that? Basically you want to have some data here because you want to modify it on this level, but you also need here. So where you will store this state, where that should be?
Well, 2 levels up, I guess.
So here. Yeah, exactly. So that means that you need to pass some handler here, right? And that handler will be passed here. So when you change something here, it will trigger this one, and that will trigger some handler from here, modify state, and that will update the whole tree, right? Remember that when you change state, it will re-render the whole tree from top to bottom. So it's not very efficient, right? And just to pass some data to this component is not very efficient. And that is why Redux basically resolving this problem. So we have something like global state, and you don't have if you have something that's required in different parts of your application, you basically have just this. So you're storing data here. You don't need state here. You don't need state handler here and here. And you have the same here. So you basically have direct access to the data. So if you modifying it, send into global state. If you change the global state, it will update your component because you have a dependency. And basically you have direct communication. You don't need to pass through the whole tree.
Right, so it's a bit like if you had like a global variable.
Yeah, exactly. So that is why Redux is very helpful, because with Redux you can have this global state where you will keep your data and you can access from any point of your application, from any part of your application. You don't think that you will not need to have your local states. If you need something locally, you still create state, that's fine. But if you see that some state needs to be in very different places, you just put it in global state. So you use it in combination. Something that should be shared across the platform, you store in Redux in global state. Something that is local, you create in your state locally for whatever, for each component where you need it. Yeah, it's up to you basically. But I just want to emphasize that if you need something globally everywhere or in some different parts, you just store it in global state.
So, as an example, you would have, how should you think about that? So, a global state would be something like information on someone that would be shared everywhere, and then local state would be just some mechanics on a specific page.
Yeah, for example, as you said, you have some configuration for the user, right? You have huge application. Like in that configuration, you have a language. So every time you go to any view, it will take from the global state, it will take the configuration, the language, and will translate the whole page, right? Because it should be shared to any view. But also this page can have different components with different state, because you have some counters, maybe you have some tables, etc. So this is a separate thing, and you can have it on local state. But yeah, this stuff like configuration can be stored in global state with Redux.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, Ricardo, by the way.
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if I'm mute. I'm driving now, but I'm here.
You know it's unsafe, right?
I know what? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, sorry. Basically, to simplify state, store all your state in app. Change. You basically, again, this is what we just discussed, that you need to, for now, you're storing everything in app, passing through as props, but we want to avoid it. And Redux, following the Flux pattern, which basically action, stores, and dispatcher. So action means that you create an action that you want to do something with your global state. And we will get to actual, like we will create today a counter with the state, with Redux. But you need to dispatch some action to modify your state. You can't just modify state directly. You dispatch in an action. And that is why you have dispatchers. And store is your actually, so this is another word of state. So if you have a global state, we call it store or global store. And views, but it's not about views for today. It's just the actual component, the visual components. So this is Flux pattern. So sometimes Redux can be overkill, right? Because you don't need to have a global, you can think that, okay, I can create, I can store everything in global state, but it's not the case. you still need to divide global state with local state and understand that, okay, if I definitely need something across the platform, I want to store it globally. But if not, I prefer to keep it locally if I have some local state. So yeah, Redux can be overkill. And to be honest, I saw in different projects that people just were obsessed with Redux, and sometimes they use Redux even when they don't need it. So for example, we had a form where the user were providing information. So when you open the form, it will basically create data in store. So when you start typing, it will modify in global state the whole Redux state, because when you're typing, when you finish, you hit submit, it will send data to the server and destroy everything in state. So there is no point to having global state, because you creating on open when you open the form and destroying when you closing the form. There is no point to have global state. But people were obsessed of using the fancy stuff. The Redux was introduced on that point, and everybody said, let's store everything in global state. So yeah, don't do that, because it's just overkill. And this is just a wrong usage of Redux. Redux has a specific purpose. So yeah, we have UI. And if from UI, you dispatching some action, that action basically processing, so it goes to reducer. Reducer will process your action, and this reducer will return you a new store, the new state basically. So store and state is the same thing. So a new store, and you will get it on your UI. And again, if you modify something, you need to dispatch the action. Action will be processed in your reducer, and reducer will return you the new state. Again, we will build today a thing that you will see how it actually works in practice. So actions. The requirements for actions, that they are objects. They must have type. This is a requirement. Type is often descriptive string. So normally you have something like that. You have type, and in our case that will be count up and count down, because we will build a counter. But this is the idea, that you dispatching the action with type and the value of that type. You also can pass data through it, but we will get there. So another thing is the arguments, the payload. This is how you pass in data to the reducer. So when you dispatching your action, you're setting type, because it is required, and you can pass payload, and you can pass whatever you want. It can be an object, it can be an array, just a number or string, it doesn't matter. It's just a regular, so the whole action is just a regular object, and this payload is just a regular key. And you basically pass in some data to the state. So you can actually pass specific, you can trigger the action that will modify the state. So in our case, let's say we have a counter, and all we need to dispatch is just a type, right? And just based on type, do some action, increment or decrement our state. But with you can do something more complex with it, and you can dispatch the action and, like, for example, the add, and you pass in what value you want to add. So you actually can pass some data. And again, that data can be complex, like another object or whatever. Yeah. Reducer. So reducer takes two things, the current state and the action. Again, we will create examples in a few minutes. And that will return you a new state. So this is the simple logic. This is a function, so reducer is a function. It takes two arguments, current state and action, and returns you a new state. So here is an example of typical reducer. So you have reducer, state, action, and in that action, see that you're basically checking if type of the action is count up, you want to increment counter in the state. right? If it's count down, you're just decrementing. And if type is count, you potentially want to add some value from payload, because this is a type count.
And do you need to save it in a separate file so that we know it's a Redux function?
No, so it's not required, but obviously as a good practice, you want to separate everything in different places. And especially in React, that will because we will talk about that on Wednesday. It's very, very important to keep everything structured. So yeah,
how does React know it's a Redux?
You actually doing setup for that, and we will do that on Wednesday. Yeah, I'll show you. So yeah, store is just like state. This is the same thing basically. When it changes, it will trigger the event, and that will in React it will re-render UI. So here, yeah, the terminology is dispatch an action to the store. So basically, you dispatching some specific action, and reducer will process it and do something with the store. Subscribe. So in JavaScript, you can subscribe to changes, and that will trigger something when you do some modification in your store. Yeah, store passes the actions through the reducer, and store is updated. So this is the flow. Here we have how to get started with Redux. This is their official documentation. And yeah, you normally install it as a package. So npm install Redux, and we have React Redux. But for today, because we just use pure JavaScript, we will use script tag. So we will just do this. So let me just, here I have a basic setup, and I will add script tag and src, this one. So we are adding Redux to our project, and I want to script I want to add my own JavaScript file, which is JS. I need to use serve. Remember that to use, you can run your files, you can open it in browser just as a local file, HTML file, but you need to use serve if you want to have a kind of host your file locally. So if you do serve index, what's going on? Serve index.html. Oh, director. What's going on? Index.html. So, not able to read. Server. Okay. What that's odd. Okay, just serve. So if you go to localhost 5000, we actually, let me just put some text here. H1 with let's say count, and let's start from 0. Yeah, okay, so we have it. Because we've added, see that you have so connected means that I've added my index.js, so that's fine. Let me just split it to right, and we have Redux now. So let's check what do we have in Redux. As you can see, we've added actually Redux, and we have it. Everything.
You added as a script in your HTML file.
Yes, here. Yeah, this one.
And this is going to be the same URL for every project.
This is Redux URL just to add the whole package. With React, you will install with npm. You will do npm install Redux and React Redux. This is for JavaScript basically. This is just a CDN. They serve in the file, and you just connecting this file to your project.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so you have Redux. Oh, sorry, I pressed too many times. We have Redux here, and you basically now can use Redux for your project. And we can have access. Let me just check get state function. Is not okay. Get state is not defined. Let me just Redux. I just want to Redux. No, get. Let me just double check that. Well, yeah, we need to check the documentation, but we will do that in a few moments. Okay, so we've added Redux to our project. Oh, why is not rendering? Wait a second. Right, we haven't initiated. I know why we don't have it. So the basic setup is basically I want to create a reducer and add Redux to my project, right? So in JavaScript, I will create reducer. Reducer. So remember that we have two arguments for reducer is state and action. And that will return our new state. So this is the whole logic. And we need to create store, and basically we need to instantiate store. So you do this with Redux, create store, and pass in your reducer. So const store and Redux create store and pass in our reducer. User. Yeah. So we have store, which is great. Let's actually test it here. So store. What's going on? I'm pretty sure that should be defined. React is not defined. What? Sorry. Redux. So Redux create store. Yeah. Store. Now you can see that we have an access to dispatch, get state, and replace reducer. So get state to get actual global state. Dispatch means that you can actually use the function to dispatch the action. And replace reducer is basically replace reducer. To be honest, I've never used that before. Subscribe is to listen for changes. And symbol, to be honest, I have no clue what is symbol because I've never used it as well. Some observable, meh. But basically all you need to have is dispatch and get state. This is two things that you need, and subscribe is actually basically the listener to update, to call something as a callback when you change the state. So you will trigger some callback. So let's actually, because our state, if you do store dot get state, we have undefined, right? Because we don't have anything. Our state is undefined. So what we normally do, let me actually show you here. We've set in initial state. So, and this is like a very default setup for Redux. When you create in reducer, you have initial state and you create in some initial state. So in our case, let's create initial state, const initial state. And this is just an object, just a regular object. And we will have count and we will start from 0. So now I just want to set as a default value. So if you're not, because initially when we create in a store, we don't have any data for state. That is why we're saying, because this is undefined on initial step, we want to set initial state as a value. So now if I go to my Redux, refresh and run get store, I actually have count 0, right? So I'm getting that from the store now. So you can see that here I'm not doing anything with data, but it is in state already because I'm setting default state. So I just want to show you, so here we have actions. We're not utilizing it yet, but let's actually do that. Let's actually create, I want to get from actions, I want to get type, right? And we will do that from actions. And now I can create this is a very default setup for Redux. You have something like switch and you check in for type. And if you have type, let's say count or increment, let's do increment. Increment, you will have state dot count plus equal 1, right? We can do the same for decrement. Decrement -1. Yeah, and we want to have breaks. Remember, when you have switch, you need to have break to not execute everything. And by default, if you're not matching our two cases, I just want to return the current state. So I will not modify my state. So I will just basically do return. Normally, the good practice is that you don't want to actually modify state. I'm just thinking to show it to you. So we will do something like return an object where we will spread state. This is what you will see in actual projects. So you take in everything you have in state and set in count to state count -1, right? So you're not actually modifying. Remember the rule from React that you don't want to modify directly. So this is the very default, again, this is what you will have in any project, something like that. Same here, you just want to do plus. Okay, so now if I refresh, I have get state count, basically get state, and I have count 0. But remember that we have in store, we have dispatch, and we are dispatching actions. So in our case, if I do store dot dispatch and dispatch the action, the required and we use type, right? So I will pass type increment. I'm dispatching just an action, right? I'm dispatching action increment. Hit enter. So now if I do get state, I have 1. Yeah, so I'm actually modifying the state. Again, I don't have anything here that I'm not storing variables, like not doing any other things. It's basically just working with state. It's not, so yeah, I can keep data in my state. So, you see that manually, let me actually set here, so count, I just want to do something like, I'm just thinking, yeah, let's do the count. So I want to find the element. So const count element will be document query selector, and I will look for count, right? For my class count. So now for this one, I want to set inner text to count. Yeah, actually, let me think. So that will, I'm just thinking how to update it here, because you want to modify, yeah, you want to modify the value. So let me comment it out for a second. We need to have subscribe because there is no way to update the DOM with this state. So I want to create the subscribe. So here I also showed on the other slide. We have subscribe. So you doing subscription to the store and you can have a callback, whatever you want to do. Right? Wait a second, sorry. Something beeping, let me just exit. 1 second. 1 second. Why it is so slow? One moment. Okay. Yeah. So now I want to have my subscribe. Yeah. So I switched off. So I have store and I have subscribe. And this is a function that takes the callback function. And here, console log, let's have state updated. Right? So if I go here, refresh, now again we have 0, but I can dispatch the action and you can see that we are actually triggering our subscribe, right? State updated. So that means for us, that means that this is the way how we can update our DOM with the latest state. So what I need to do is const count, and remember how to get data from state. We just have store dot get state, right? And you will get the whole state. So I just need to destructure it from the response.
So why did the store subscribe? How did it got activated? So how did you do store?
I did.
For dispatch, how does it automatically do a store subscribe?
So this is the whole idea of Redux, because Redux will handle it. So from Redux you have dispatch and you have subscribe, and when you dispatch in the action, Redux will take this action, do something with it, and trigger a subscribe for you.
Okay. So whenever you do dispatch, you automatically have a subscribe as well.
Yeah. So basically you declare in subscribe, and every time you modify state, it will trigger the callback that you are passing here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So now what we want to have inner text is count. Yeah. So let's see what we will have. If I dispatch the action, I'm actually modifying our state and I'm updating the text here. Yep. Does it make sense? So we've dispatching the action. Let's actually add 2 buttons. Div buttons, button multiply 2. So we will have increment, decrement, and we will have class increment and decrement. So I want to listen for clicks and just do increment element increment btn, and here we will have increment decrement, and here we will have the same. Okay, so we have 3 elements. So can anyone help me to create listeners for increment and decrement? So I have increment. What do I want to do?
Dot add event listeners.
Yep, add event listener. So click.
Yeah.
And here we will have a callback function, right? And what we want to do, we want to dispatch the action with specific type, right?
Yeah.
So you want,
okay.
Yeah, you do store
Dot
dispatch,
and then I guess you want to return the decrement if you want increment. So it's increment here, increment.
Yeah, not return, just pass an object with type increment. Right? You're not returning, you just dispatching the action.
Okay, so your parameter is an object with type increment.
Yes.
And if you go further up, how does it?
So Redux will catch it because see that you created store with our reducer, with this reducer. So Redux will catch your action, call reducer with this action, and take the type from there and do this. And return you a new state.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so basically you have the Redux that's handling something for you.
And that comes from, so if we look at line 10, the const type equals action. So here you're kind of passing the action that is type of increment.
Yeah, so basically type will be increment in our case.
Yeah. So if you were passing something like type, and then you had like another object called not type but like something else, then it would take the type.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, type is required for dispatch. For action requires type key.
Yeah.
So you need to have it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so here we have increment and let's have decrement. So decrement. This is it, right? So now let's try refresh. So when I click increment, we're actually dispatching the action, right? And it is working. Yeah, so we don't have anything, basically we don't have any variable like we did before with JavaScript that we just modifying this variable and rendering. We actually dispatching the action to the store, and based on the store we will get the data.
Yeah.
Also, let me check, because this is what you can do, because state can be big, and I think that it takes here, it works in Redux, React, so I think that should be here as well. So you can do state.count and return just count, just this specific part of state. That should be the same, I think. So you can pass a callback, and that will use this callback to pass the state, and you can actually return a specific part of your state. So let me.
Sorry, can you catch that?
Ooh, no, actually, let me check. I want 1 second. Console log count. Oh, okay. So it actually returns state.count. I see. Yeah. So here you can do this and destructure from the response, right? Because get state will return you the whole state. Yeah?
Yeah.
And you can basically destructure it because that will be an object and you want to take just count. Because you can have, let's say we can have key, you know, A. For example, we have two things in state. And I want to get just count, so that will work. You basically get in the whole state and get in just count. So you're ignoring the key from there. So if I refresh, it is working with the number. Yeah. But you also can do something like state as a callback function, and let's return state. I just want to see what that will return to us. So we're not destructuring, we just getting whole state. And let me comment it out, this one. Refresh, click. You can see that we're getting the whole state. So what you can do dot count. I think that should work. No. So it is working in React. I'm wondering, here it just behaves differently. It might be just it behaves differently. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So you can't do actually, because it actually returns you the whole state. Fair enough, it's just from React hooks, I believe. Okay, so yeah, basically here, we will talk about that, but for React. So here you can just get in the whole state. Let me just put it as it was. Like that. So you get in your count from the state and just rendering it here. Yep. Does it make sense? Okay. So normally you keep your actions separately. So you will create something like you potentially can create a separate file, but you can do something like actions, and that will be your object. And you will have something like increment. That will be your type increment. Then you will have decrement, same thing, decrement, something like that. And now you can just use actions.increment or actions.decrement. Increment and actions decrement, something like that. So now you have actions in one place. Another thing, what people normally do, because when you use the strings, it's very easy to make a mistake, right? So you can do like increment, and imagine that you accidentally just put increment, right? So now VS Code doesn't show you anything that you are mismatching or something. So when you click plus, it doesn't work. So that is why people normally create constants. And you have bunch of you have like constants file. Consts, let's say constants. And let's do something like increment. That will be increment. And decrement will be decrement. So now that means that here, when you use your variables, your type, let's say, you will not make a mistake because VS Code will highlight you. And the same here. If type equals to decrement, increment, so constants increment, right? So it's highlighting you, so it's less chances that you will miss the increment, that you will make a mistake, because VS Code will highlight you and suggest you autocomplete. So everything basically is based on variables, let's say. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It's just a basically good practice. So refresh, and it is working now. Yeah. So as I said, imagine that it's not about just one thing, right? Because state can be huge, and with state you can actually have multiple things. Let's say I will create another one. Key pressed, and let's put span, and here class, let's say key. I just want to register some key, dispatch the action with the key, and render it here. So let me just add key element, key. So now I want to add another event listener on window. Add event listener, key down, and I want to dispatch the action, some action, right? We don't have any actions. Let's say set key. Set key. So now here we will have set key, and here we will create another action set key. So I want to create another option, another case. We will have constant set key, and we will return same state, but key should be a key, the actual key that we are triggering, right? That we are pressing. So that means that we want to have a payload. We want to pass actual data to our action. So our action should be a function which will take a payload, and we will pass this payload to the component, to further, basically, not to the component, further. Does it make sense?
You lost me a bit here.
So
what's the payload here?
Yeah, look at this. We want to dispatch some action when we want to dispatch some action when we press a key, right? So let me just comment it out, and let's handle the key. So key down, event. Do you remember how to get key?
Isn't that key down? Oh, you mean the key you pressed?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember. Event
Let's
dot.
get key on, key down. Event key code.
Key code.
So let's do event dot key code. Let's test it. Log. Unexpected token somewhere. Oh yeah, here. Just for now, it doesn't matter. So refresh. Now when we're pressing, right, we are getting actually the number. Can we actually get not the number? Let's see what we have. Not key code, but the whole event. I'm wondering, because I want to take a character. Yeah, so we have key, right? So event.key. So we know how to get the key, and I want to store it in my global state, in my state. So I want to dispatch the action. In actions, I want to pass my key. So I will do set key, and I will pass my key. So this is just passing to action, right? And set key action will take my key and return an object to me, right? It will return an object with type set key and the payload, which is my key actually.
So yes, okay, will be your key. So basically, it will be an object that will have two elements: the type, which is constant set key, and then the key number.
Yeah, the key. Yeah, exactly. So now that means that when I'm dispatching such action, I will get payload for this case, right?
Yeah.
So for these two, the payload will be undefined because we're not passing anything.
Yeah.
But for this one, we will have actually payload. So we can actually use payload here to set, to modify, because initial state is count and key.
Yeah.
So it can be actually empty string by default. So empty string, and when you press, you dispatching the action set key, and you will modify that in state.
Right.
So here in subscribe, now we can actually get key as well. And we can do with our, how do we call it? Key element. Inner text will be our key, right? Yeah, so every time we dispatching the action, that will change our state, and because we change our state, we will trigger our callback from subscribe. We'll get the value and setting as the value on the page. So if I refresh, press any key, dispatch is not defined. Perfect. Because we forgot about store.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, why didn't you add store?
Yeah, I'm just blind. Yep. So let's try again. Click. You can see that we have it, and we also can modify our state. So actually it is working. Yeah. So you see that we have a bit more complex state. And you can have much more complex state than this one. So it's just a very basic instance of the state. And you can actually split this into different reducers, and you can combine them and have a bunch of reducers. So you can actually have not just that kind of switch, you can have multiple reducers and use them and dispatch different actions for different, so you don't need to mix everything. And we will talk about that in React, but you don't need to mix everything here into one thing. You can handle that separately and have a nice structured code. Also, the very, very helpful thing, this is also important, is Redux development tools. So Redux, let me just go Chrome, Redux. So you need to install this tool that will help you to debug everything related to Redux. So because I already installed that, but this is Redux DevTools. Yeah, let me just see. So here in Redux, if I open Redux, store not found, because we need to connect the store, we need to connect it to the tool. And to do that, Redux DevTools, let me just go to their website. And here, browser extension and configuration. Let me just check. We want to add this to our create store. This line. So as a second argument to our create store, you want to do this. And now you can use it and see and debug your application. So if I refresh, you can see that we have the tool here. Again, you need to add this as a second argument. You need to add this line to your create store. You can find it in their documentation, in the example, how to set up. So without this line, if I remove this line and refresh the page, no store found, because the browser doesn't know about your store. But if you add this Redux DevTools extension, refresh, you can actually see everything. You have state, and in our case it's count and key, right? So 0 and key is empty string. So if I press any key, it will actually show you the new state. And you can see the difference that when you dispatch the set key, it's showing you the action that you've dispatched, and it's showing you that it was empty string and became F. So if I press another time for B, it's showing that you just dispatched set key, and that became from F to B. And if I click increment, it will show you that you actually just dispatched increment and changed from 0 to 1. And your state is here, right?
That's pretty cool. You even have like a time.
Yeah, so you can actually jump. Wait a sec. Difference. Wait, what's going on? Jump. Oh, right. You want to, you basically, you're just skipping. Wait a second. Yeah. So basically, come on. 3, jump. Yeah. So you basically jump into the last one. In my case now, it is 4. And again, you basically, you can see every single step of your Redux, and you can trace all changes and what's going on and how it works. It also can build you like a chart with a tree to see your state, and you can basically see the whole tree. It can be formatted as an object or just as a regular tree. So it is very helpful, especially when you have, you can imagine that if you have big application, it is very helpful for you to see the actual, all your state, to understand what's going on, what kind of actions you've triggered, and how, yeah, basically what to do, and where you might have a bug or something like that. Yeah. Any questions?
No, that's quite cool, this inspector view.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let me think. Because let me just show you basically here. Normally what you will do, you will create something like, let's say actions, or Redux, potentially Redux. And there you will have actions. You will have reducers. So here, let's create index.js. And here I will create constants as well. Const.js. So let's actually structure everything. So here is our actions. So we want to export. Then, oh, sorry, this is not constants here. Then we want to export our constants. Export. And normally you can do not constants, but you can actually export each separately. So you have something like just bunch of variables. Export const. Export const. And export const. Something like that. So you export in 2 consts, 3 consts, and here you can actually import. Import Siri, come on. So import. What do you want to have? Increment, decrement, and set key from constants. Right? So we have this here. And now here as well, I want to increment my, I want to import my constants, because we will have it here. And this one is in Redux, right? So Redux and actions and constants, something like that. We don't need our HTML for now. Okay, do we also have, yeah, we have some actions, but we need to, again, each action can be exported separately. So increment, for example, will be just this. And normally you have them as functions. So all of them, because some of them have payload, some is not. That is why, just to keep it consistent, you just have them const. Oh my gosh.
Why do you need to separate them when you export?
Just to, you don't want, if for example in one place you have just one action, why do you need to export the whole object with all actions?
Okay.
Right? So it just basically just to keep it nicer to structure your code. So let me just, oh, sorry. Doing 2 and export const.
Yeah, I guess what you're showing us is what it would look like if it's a more complex project.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll do it this way. It's just too simple.
Yeah. So for now, that might not make sense for you. But let me just check that. Yeah, something like that. So we have 3 actions and we have 3 constants. So here we don't have constants, and we will have actions, which is increment, decrement, and set key. So increment, decrement, set key. So now here we have reducer, which is fine. We don't need this, this, and this. And all of them are functions. Something like that. Okay. I hope that that will work. It will not. Yeah. So that should be module. Let me just check in HTML. As I remember, it is type module. Okay, the server response with meme is enforced module script. Let me just check. Script type module. I don't use it every day, so yes. Yeah, okay, so that should be just module, I think. And export const square export import. Yeah, that's fine. So why it doesn't like why it, let me just double check why it doesn't like my server responded with not the meme. Failed to load module script. Yeah. npm build prod. Okay, yeah, so it is about compiler. Okay, what we can do, what can we do? Yeah, it's about compiler, which is struggling to compile. Basically. The compiler, the serve compiler that we use. Let me just double check if he commented out this. Refresh. Increment is not defined. Where do we have increment? Initial. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Refresh. Okay, let me just remove this. Uncomment this. Like that. Okay, so maybe it just want to, it shouldn't, because it should be module exports, and theoretically we can do this, that. It's so odd every time to jump between languages, and yeah, it just very inconvenient module exports. And here we have just increment, decrement, and set key. I'm wondering, will that help? Okay, Redux server with, yeah, still the same thing. Strict meme type checking is enforced in module script. Let me just start again. Nah, it constant. It won't. Yeah, I think that's our it's not a bundler, it's a compiler. Serve won't compile that. I'm just wondering how can we quickly fix it, because theoretically we can use some module compiler npm. Let me just check, do we have anything? We have some, okay, we have some parcel, I think, parcel npm that you can run, but it requires some config as well. Export default, import classes. Yeah, so they are allowing us to actually build, to use like a bundler, but first we can't just use it with serve. So serve will not work as in that way. Oh, let me check as well. So this one, yeah, that will not work for us, unfortunately, because you need to have a bundler if you want to use it as we do, like by exporting, importing stuff. Otherwise, it will just complain about the meme file. So let me just double check. Maybe they can suggest something smart that we can quickly Google for the solution.
You can put that on a regular server rather than use your own server.
Yeah. So you need to basically bundle. You need to have some bundler to.
What is a bundler?
It will take your JavaScript, process it into basically something readable for browser. So this is the whole point of that. Let me just check what can we have here. Okay, simple JS bundler. Export entry direction. Just thinking, what can I show you? Details about services meme JS modules. Hello, JS modules. Yeah, I think. Where do they have? Do they recommend? Yeah, it's all about bundlers. Okay, let me try to use actually Parcel. Maybe Parcel will not require us to do a lot of things. If I install, so npm init -y, and now Parcel bundler. And then, yeah, so, okay. So they are saying that we can do -g, and then we can run just Parcel and the file name. So that might help. Let's see. Remember we spoke about Webpack. So this is one bundler is actually Webpack is a bundler. And this is just another one, the simpler one. Come on. Yeah. Almost there. Come on. Okay, done. So Parcel index HTML. Okay. Parcel require is not defined. Yeah, see, so now it is working. Because we run in bundler, I'm wondering what is the Parcel require. Wait a second. So this is is not defined. Possible solution when you remove from the script element, no error observed. Avoid. Okay, yeah. okay, fair enough. So this is just another thing from the bundler. From parcel, you don't need to have module. You don't need to specify. Yeah, perfect. So now it is working. Yeah, so we've separated the whole application into separate files, and you have nice structure. So we have the only thing that is not outsourced is actually reducer. So we can actually do outsource reducer here as well. So I will just do my reducer. In the reducer file, you have your initial state and you have your reducer. So export. And I want to export my reducer. So I need my constants for my reducer. Up. And I want to, it's not a Redux, just one level up, actions and constants. Yeah, okay. And here I want to import reducer as yeah, let's actually name it somehow. So I want to export default and here I will do something like reducer, not reducer, just count. Come on, count reducer from, and that will be Redux reducers. This is it. So now my reducer, I'm just looking for the setup. Where is my, yeah, this one, count reducer. So I hope reducer is not defined. What's going on? Reducers consts. Wait a second. What am I missing? Export default reducer. What am I missing? Actually, just make it nicer. Const. Here we'll have const reducer. Okay, yeah, so now it is working. So we separated everything, right? So we put reducer into reducer, actions, and we have constants, so we have everything in place. And in our JavaScript main file, we basically have, we initialize Redux, and then we just using store to dispatch and get state. So theoretically, again, to make it even more cleaner, we can do dispatch, get state, right? So now we don't need to have store. Because we just dispatch in events. Yep. Because we're destructuring our create store, we destructuring dispatch and get state. I'm just cleaning it up, the whole logic, just to make it shorter. And again, the same here, because it's arrow function, we can have in one line. Same here, in one line. And yeah, this is pretty much it. So we have a bunch of elements. We have event listeners for them. We can remove this one as well. And we have subscribe. Ooh, I forgot about subscribe. We need to have subscribe here as well. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So now it is very compact, and you can actually have your global state or store, and you just using it. So, and the whole application is structured. So this is the whole point of Redux. And you can have multiple source, as I said, because if you go, let me just show you in documentation. If you go to Redux, we have combined stores, combine reducers. So what you can have, you can do something like combine and list all your reducers and pass your combined into your store. So here you can, in documentation, you can see how you can combine them. We have just one reducer in our application, but we can do combine. And actually, for now, we have one reducer, as I said, but let's actually split it, because technically we can have two, right? Because we have count and we have key. So here, let's call it count. And I will create another one, key.js. So for count, we will have, so for count, we don't need to have key. And we don't need to have initial state, don't need to be an object. It can be just a value, just 0, right? Because it just counts, it's very basic. And here we don't need to have set key. So we will have here, we'll have just increment and decrement, and this is it. And for key, we will have set key. Again, the default will be just a string, just an empty string. And here we will look for set key, and we will set our key to a state. And this is pretty much it. So we can call it key reducer. Let's rename it. And here we will have count reducer. So now we have two reducers. Normally what you will do in real life, you will create another file which will be index.js, and as they showed, you will combine two reducers into one. So you will have something like that. Const, and like this. And you want to import count reducer from count reducer, from count, and another one from key. And here you will have key. And what you will have here, so state key, state count, and here you will have state key. This one will be key. So, and export default combined reducer. So now,
should line 7 be also key reducer rather than B? What is this B?
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. You're right. So now here, where do we have reducers? That will be just combined reducer. That will be just from reducers. and you will pass here combined reducers. So let's see what we will have, because I'm expecting to have, ooh, oh, this is another one, sorry. Undefined, perfect. Let's see what we have here. So we have get state. I want to see what do we have on initial load. Look, get state. Refresh. We have count reducer, oh, and key reducer. Ah, this is a problem. Count and key, because this is an object. Refresh. Perfect. So when we dispatch the action, we dispatch in the action increment. And let's see increment. We need to specify where to dispatch, I think. Combined reducers. Let me just check. So you're getting
create store combined.
Both A and B reducer, yeah, okay, so that's fine. So for the reducer, it is working, right? Because we have, we actually have the data. We have its count and key. So our dispatch, we just need to double check with the dispatch. Ooh, sorry. For dispatch, let me just check. Oh, sorry. So here we have the count. Ah, wait a second. I'm just thinking, because maybe here dispatch comes from the combined. So I need to specify what part of the application I want to change. So wait a second. So here increment. Nah, that should be fine. So we're dispatching. Okay. Let me just check what we are getting, because I think that's here. So I want to see what I will get as a count, because we might just getting too much stuff. And key. Let's see. Increment. Ooh, we have none. Perfect. So are we to debug again? Let's actually go through the whole journey. To debug, I have increment. So increment is an action, and we're dispatching the type increment.
Yeah.
And in our user, let's check console log. Yes. See that we've changed it. I know what is a problem. We changed to number, and here we're still modifying as an object. That is why.
This needs to be an object.
So now it's not an object anymore. It just the old value, right? Plus 1, or old value minus 1. Because now it's just a number. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's just a regular number. And the same for count. Again, it should be, yeah, it should be basically just the payload. This is it. So let's try. Yeah. And now it is working. So Redux will handle the mapping to the right reducer based on the action that you're dispatching. So our reducers nicely handled separately, and when you dispatch the action, actually Redux will handle that and map to the right reducer. So you don't need to think about that. I was surprised that it was broken, but it was just me. Yep. Any questions on that?
No questions.
Okay, I will, let me just double check. React banking app. Wait a second, sorry. So we have readme. Oh yeah, so your task, we don't have any separate exercises for this week. We have just, you basically have the task to add Redux to the banking app. Did you check the design for banking app?
No, not yet. I am behind on
Okay.
schedule. I'm still on exercises, so.
Yeah, so you will see the, because Redux, as you mentioned, that Redux has the reason, like the main reason is to handle complex applications to have a global state. That is why it's very hard to create Redux exercises for like counters or whatever. But that is why we have for this banking app, you will build your banking app, and then you can add Redux to handle all the global store for this application. Because you will see how complicated that will be for bigger React application to pass data between components. But with Redux, that will be much easier for you.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is it for lesson 1. And yeah, we will, on Wednesday, we will talk about how to use Redux with React.
Perfect. Quick one is are you still then available in case we need you for exercises after the course, or?
Yeah, sure. Yes. So if you're stuck on anything, feel free to ping me, and I'm happy to help.
Because I'm not sure I'll be able to finish everything by end of this week. So.
Yeah. No worries. No problem at all.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Then see you. I will be with you on Wednesday because I want to say goodbye and wave, cry a bit, you know. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you then, and see you on Wednesday.
See you Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.